What if the key to being a better parent isn't about doing more, but feeling differently? Today, we're going to unpack how so many parents wake up with that knot of not enoughness and how a simple shift from shame to trust can transform your family's emotional landscape. You'll walk away with tools to quiet that inner critic and reconnect with what matters most. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm your host, Kendra Nielson, and today we're discussing how to break free from shame and attachment to find true fulfillment as a parent and spouse. As I read or reread some of Brené Brown's books, or even some of Kristin Neff's books, and even some of the podcast guests I've had on, we've talked about shame, and I'm reminded of shame because it shows up so much in my therapy sessions with my clients. It really is at the root of so many of our challenges that we're seeking to overcome. And the more that I work with these clients, the more that I realize sometimes we're doing things in therapy that almost feels more like a Band-Aid instead of getting to the root cause, which is often shame. And we're going to explore that a little bit more today. First, I want to talk about a story, as I often do. And this time I'll call this person Bethany. So this is a story of Bethany, who has several kids, and she feels constantly overwhelmed and inadequate. She rushes through her mornings, she struggles at work, and she feels disconnected from her family every evening. So no matter how hard she tries, she feels like she's never enough. Not as a mom, not as a wife, not as a professional. And this shame and self-doubt consume her and leave her feeling stuck and unfulfilled. And we talk about that in session, what she can do about that, how she can feel like she's enough, how she's more, how she can have that greater self-worth, that self-esteem. Well, I'll come back to Bethany in just a second, but let's talk about what shame and attachment are. Shame is that feeling of not being enough or being fundamentally flawed in some way, but it's different from guilt, which is about our actions. Shame is about what we are at our core. Now, attachment in this context is looking for worth in external things. So maybe that's our kids' achievements, maybe that's our spouse's approval, or our career success, or our prominence in our community, whether that's a faith community or school community, whatever that is. Brené Brown defines shame this way, and I love her definition. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. She also says this, and it's very insightful and helpful. She said, shame needs 3 things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. Now, you might have an idea because you might have this happen in your life, but if you don't have that self-awareness yet, or maybe a therapy background, you might not understand the impact that shame has on parenting and relationships. When we're operating from a place of shame and attachment, we are not fully present for our kids or our partners. We might become controlling or withdrawn and afraid of failing or being judged. For example, a dad might push his son to excel in sports, not because it's what his child wants, but because he's attached to the idea that his worth as a father is tied to his son's athletic success. And I know we've all seen examples of that. Maybe we've done that ourselves. So it's not that we don't want the best for our child, but it's so attached to how we view ourselves. As an alternative, I learned something from one of our past guests named Crystal Heitzma, and she talked about the trust energy, and I'll explain what that is. So this is a state where we're not attached to a specific outcome. We trust ourselves, we trust our kids, our partners, and the process of life itself. And that is a tall order. It's hard to do that. But Pema Chodron says this: we already have everything we need. There is no need for self-improvement. All these trips that we lay on ourselves, the heavy-duty fearing that we're bad and hoping we're good, the identities we so clearly cling to, the rage, the jealousy, and the addictions of all kinds, never touch our basic wealth. Now, that can feel a little bit confusing and a little overwhelming if you don't understand exactly what she's saying here. But at the heart of that is we have what we need, and we don't have to keep scrambling to feel like we are enough. We can feel like we are enough right now with everything that we have in our lives. It is enough. We are enough. That doesn't mean that there's not room for growth or progression, but that we can love ourselves where we're at. So how do we shift from that attachment to trust? This shift isn't about never feeling shame or attachment again, because that's pretty much impossible, but it's about recognizing those feelings when they do come up and choosing a different response. And here's how you can do it. The first thing you can do is have that greater awareness. So just notice that you're in that attachment energy space. Remember that attachment is looking for our worth in external things. So if you're in that attachment energy, you have that energy where you're looking for that worth in outside things. The second thing is just to take a breath, just pause, slow down, get still. And the next thing is to connect and tune into your body. We do this a lot in trauma therapy, and this is from EMDR to hypnotherapy to all forms of it. And this is where I first learned about checking in with my body and seeing where that tension is, just noticing what's happening in my body. And it gives me clues. It helps me start to understand what's going on before I might cognitively understand what's going on. The next thing you can do is release. Imagine yourself letting go of this attachment for worth in those external things. Just imagine letting that go. And the last one is to trust, to remind yourself that you are enough just as you are. Now, that whole process, those whole 5 steps don't have to take that long. And yet it's a constant practice that we can lean into, that we can use to shift to a more trusting approach. So here are simple ways you can practice this as a parent. So instead of micromanaging your kids' homework, trust in their ability to learn and to grow. Love and Logic talks a lot about this with natural consequences. Well, so many of us like to control. We like to micromanage. We can't even imagine setting that down. And yet everyone would be happier if we did. Another way you can do that is, rather than trying to fix your partner's bad mood, allow them space to feel their emotions. This is one that I'm always practicing because I grew up as more of a people pleaser. If not always in my actions, always in my mind. I was so tuned into everyone else's feelings that was hard to allow them to feel their feelings themselves. And now even to give them space to feel those feelings. Now I'm much better, especially as a therapist, but sometimes it's the hardest with those that I'm closest to, namely my spouse, and then my kids after that. Usually with a child, it's easier to let them feel feelings, but with your spouse, I often feel more anxious, and maybe you do as well. Another simple thing you can do is when you make a mistake, practice that self-compassion instead of harsh self-criticism. Simple ways to let it go and move from that attachment to trust. If you want to have more of a shame-resilient culture in your family life, practice these principles and you'll naturally create that. 3 simple things to focus on is encouraging effort over perfection. We really like perfection in our culture and it doesn't serve anyone. Another simple thing you can do is normalize mistakes and failures as part of growth. Sometimes we even reward failures because it means they're leaning in and trying something that they may not succeed at. They're not familiar with it, and there's beauty in that. Another thing you can do is express that unconditional love and acceptance, especially when we didn't get that ourselves growing up. It's important to check in with our kids and remind them, I love you unconditionally. And if sometimes I don't quite get it right, or you get the message that maybe I don't love you unconditionally unless you do A, B, and C, then I am sorry for my part. And I want to make it abundantly clear that that is just not the case. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you believe that and feel that. So there's a little toolkit I can give you for right now to help with this. There are 3 simple tools that you can use to increase interest and put it in your toolkit to pull out when shame might pop up. Like I said before, the first thing you can do when your kids melt down is just pause. Remember that oxygen mask analogy that we love to use? Well, you are putting your oxygen mask on first, and then taking 3 deep breaths. The second thing you can do is change that narrative. So instead of saying, why can't I handle this? Say instead, this is hard because I care so deeply. So it's changing that story we're telling ourselves, that line that we're telling ourselves that is so shame-focused, saying it in a different way that still conveys a similar thing, but without that shame. Last thing you can do is ask yourself this: would I judge my best friend for this failure? And that will often put it in perspective enough and help us let go of that shame and that attachment. I really love Kristin Neff's work. If you don't know much about her, she talks a lot about self-compassion. Well, self-compassion is a key component in combating shame because it's about treating yourself with that same kindness you'd offer a best friend. Kristin Neff says this: with self-compassion, we give ourselves the same kindness and care we'd give to a good friend. Very simple, but very important. When I was studying this and looking back on what other people had said about this, it might have been Crystal Heitzma, it might have been somebody else. I don't really remember, but they talked about oops parties. And this is a weekly celebration of mistakes where you can even celebrate by shredding those to-do lists. And this helps normalize mistakes and create this more supportive family environment. And that takes me back to the story from the beginning of Bethany. So over time, Bethany was able to transform her relationship with herself and also with her family. And she learned how to trust herself as a parent and be more present with her kids without trying to control the outcome. When she was able to do that, she was able to have a deeper connection with her kids and a more authentic relationship with her husband. She found, using her own words, that fulfillment wasn't just about being the perfect parent or spouse, but about showing up authentically with self-compassion. So she started to find joy in those small moments, and she started to believe that she was enough, just as she was. And as she did this, this rippled out into her family and affected all of her relationships and how they started to see themselves as well. My friends, if you are struggling with shame, if you are struggling with feeling like you are not enough, practice one of these small, simple things. It is just one piece of the puzzle that will help you have true joy and fulfillment in your life if you practice them. Not only for yourself, but for your family and those in your sphere of influence. If you feel like this podcast episode would help anyone you love, please share it with them, screenshot it, send them the link, whatever it might be. Or if you'd like to support the show, please go onto Apple Podcasts and review our show. If you go to the show, not just the episode, but the show, and scroll down in purple, there will be this link that says leave a review that's under the stars. And you click that, you give a quick review, you touch the stars with how many you want to leave us, and you hit submit, and it takes maybe 2 minutes. Thank you for those of you that have left a review, because that helps us get seen and reach more people. My friends, thank you for tuning in to the Fulfillment Therapy. Until next time, this is Kendra Nielson reminding you that you are enough, just as you are. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you, no matter what your house or your hair looks like. I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.